Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Our first story is titled, Parents Tried to Force Me to Move Back Home and Take Care of Them. My name is Micah. I'm 28 years old, and for a good part of the past few months, my parents have been trying to force me to move back home and become their full-time caretaker. It's been a nightmare to say the least, but I think I've finally found a way out of this mess. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio with my parents. They weren't bad parents exactly, but they were always a bit needy. They had me later in life. My mom was 40 and my dad was 45 when I was born. I was their only child and they poured all their energy and attention into me. As a kid, I didn't mind it so much, but as I got older, their constant hovering started to feel suffocating. They wanted to know where I was every minute of the day. They'd call my friends' parents to check up on me if I was at a sleepover. They insisted on driving me everywhere well into high school, long after all my classmates had their own cars or at least took the bus. Their overprotectiveness extended to every aspect of my life. When I started dating in high school, they insisted on meeting every girl I went out with and their parents. They'd set curfews that were hours earlier than my friends. They even tried to dictate what classes I took, pushing me towards safe options like accounting rather than the creative writing courses I was interested in. When it came time for college, they tried hard to convince me to go to the local community college and live at home. But I put my foot down. I needed some independence. I applied to schools out of state and ended up going to University of Michigan. Those 4 years were amazing. My first real taste of freedom and autonomy. Of course, my parents didn't make it easy. They called multiple times a day during my first semester, insisting I give them a full account of my whereabouts and activities. They showed up unannounced on campus several times, claiming they were just in the neighborhood, despite the fact that Ann Arbor was a 4-hour drive from our hometown. When I joined a fraternity in my sophomore year, they were beside themselves. My mom cried over the phone, telling me I was going to ruin my life with those hooligans. My dad threatened to cut off my tuition if I didn't quit. I stood my ground, and eventually they backed down, but not without months of guilt-tripping and passive-aggressive comments. Despite their interference, I managed to have a great college experience. I made lifelong friends, discovered new interests, and even studied abroad in Spain for a semester, though my parents tried their best to talk me out of that too. After graduation, I got a job in Chicago as a marketing associate. My parents weren't thrilled about me being so far away, but I assured them I'd visit often, and I did at first. I'd come home for major holidays and try to make it back once a month or so for a weekend. But as I got more established in my career and started building a life for myself in Chicago, those visits became less frequent. My parents would guilt-trip me about it, but I stood my ground. I was an adult with my own life now. I couldn't drop everything to come running home every time they wanted to see me. Things came to a head about 6 months ago. I got a call from my mom on a Tuesday evening. I was just settling in to watch some Netflix after a long day at work when my phone rang. "Micah, honey, it's Mom," she said when I picked up. Her voice sounded strained. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" I asked, already feeling a sense of dread. Calls from my mom rarely brought good news these days. "It's your father," she said, her voice cracking. He had a fall. He's okay, but the doctor says he shouldn't be left alone for long periods anymore. And, well, I'm not as young as I used to be either. We need help, sweetie." My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. "What kind of help, Mom?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "We need you to come home, Micah," she said. "We can't manage on our own anymore. You're our son. It's your responsibility to take care of us now." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mom, I just can't pick up and move back to Ohio. I have a life here, a job, friends. What's more important than family? She interrupted, her voice taking on that guilt-tripping tone I knew so well. After all we've done for you, is it too much to ask for you to help us in our time of need? We went back and forth for nearly an hour. By the end of the call, I was exhausted and frustrated, but I'd managed to hold my ground. I told her I'd look into home health aid services in their area and would try to visit soon to assess the situation. She wasn't happy, but she reluctantly agreed. Over the next few weeks, I researched options and made some calls. I found a reputable home health agency that could provide part-time care for my dad. It wasn't cheap, but my parents had decent savings, and I offered to chip in what I could. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. About a month after that first call, I flew home for a long weekend to check on my parents and help get the home health aid situation set up. As soon as I walked in the door of my childhood home, I knew something was off. The house was spotless, not unusual for my clean freak mom, but it seemed even more pristine than normal. There were fresh-cut flowers on every surface and the smell of pot roast, my favorite, wafting from the kitchen. "Welcome home, sweetie," my mom chirped, enveloping me in a hug. My dad shuffled over with his cane to join the embrace. "We're so glad you're here," he said, patting my back. "We have so much to talk about." Alarm bells started going off in my head. This felt like a setup. Sure enough, as soon as we sat down to dinner, they launched into their pitch. "Micah, honey," my mom began, reaching across the table to grasp my hand. "We've been thinking a lot about the future, about what's best for all of us." I braced myself. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "We think you should move back home," my dad said bluntly. "For good." I nearly choked on my pot roast. "What, Dad? We talked about this. I can't just leave my whole life in Chicago. We're getting you guys help, remember? A stranger coming in a few hours a day isn't the same as having family here," my mom said. "We need you, Micah. This is your home. Don't you want to be here for us?" "Of course I want to help," I said carefully, "but moving back permanently isn't feasible. I have a career, a life I've built." "You can get a job here," my dad interrupted. "There are plenty of marketing firms in Columbus, and your old room is just waiting for you. We even brought you a new mattress." I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. "You brought me a mattress? When?" "Last week," my mom said dryly. "We wanted everything to be perfect for when you move back." I put down my fork, my appetite gone. "Mom, Dad, I appreciate that you want me here, but I'm not moving back. That's not happening." Their faces fell in eerily identical expressions of disappointment. "But Micah," my mom said, her voice quavering, "we're your parents. We need you. How can you abandon us like this?" "I'm not abandoning you," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "I'm trying to help you while also maintaining my own life. That's not unreasonable." "So your job is more important than your family?" my dad asked, his tone accusatory. "After all we've sacrificed for you?" I took a deep breath. "My job isn't more important than you, but my entire life, my career, my friends, my independence, that is important. I'm an adult. I can't just drop everything and move back home." "Well, I think you're being very selfish," my mom sniffed. "I didn't raise you to turn your back on your family." The conversation devolved from there. By the end of the night, we were all frustrated and angry. I went to my bed in my old room feeling like a teenager again, and not in a good way. The rest of the weekend was tense. My parents alternated between guilt-tripping me and trying to sell me on the idea of moving back. They had it all planned out, where I'd work, where I'd live, with them of course, even who I could date. Mom had a list of nice girls from church she wanted to set me up with. By the time I left on Sunday, I was emotionally drained. I hugged them goodbye, promised to call soon, and breathed a huge sigh of relief as my plane took off for Chicago. I thought that would be the end of it. Again, I was wrong. Over the next few months, my parents launched a full-scale campaign to get me to move back. They called daily, often multiple times a day. They sent long, guilt-ridden emails. They even roped in extended family members and old family friends to call and try to convince me. But they didn't stop there. Their attempts to control my life and force me back home became increasingly invasive and manipulative. One day, I got a call from my boss. "Micah," he said, sounding confused, "I just got off the phone with your mother. She says you're planning to quit and move back to Chicago. Is that true?" I was mortified. "Absolutely not," I assured him. "I'm so sorry about that. My parents are, well, they're having a hard time accepting that I'm not moving back. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." My boss was understanding, but I was furious. When I called my mom to confront her about it, she acted like she'd done nothing wrong. "I was just trying to help, sweetie," she said. "I thought if your boss knew you were leaving, he might offer you a raise to stay. Then you'd have more money to help us out." I explained through gritted teeth that interfering with my job was completely unacceptable. She grudgingly agreed not to do it again, but I could tell she didn't really see the problem. A few weeks later, I came home from work to find a stack of brochures for Chicago area nursing homes in my mailbox. There was a note from my dad. "Just in case you're still planning to abandon us, here are some options for where you can ship us off to." I crumpled up the note and threw the brochures in the trash, my hands shaking with anger and guilt. The next weekend, I had plans to go on a camping trip with some friends. We'd been planning it for months, but on Friday afternoon, just as I was packing up my gear, I got a panic call from my mom. "Micah, you need to come home right away," she cried. "Your father's in the hospital." My heart raced. "What happened? Is he okay?" She sniffed. "Just come home, please." I canceled my trip and booked the first flight I could get to Chicago. When I arrived at the hospital, I found my dad sitting up in bed, looking perfectly fine. "Dad," I said, confused, "what's going on? Mom said you were in the hospital." He looked embarrassed. It was just a little dizzy spell. The doctor says I'm fine. Your mother may have overreacted a bit." I turned to my mom, who was avoiding my gaze. "Mom, did you lie to me to get me to come home?" She had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't lie exactly. Your father really did feel dizzy, and I knew you wouldn't come if I didn't make it sound serious." I was furious. "Do you really have any idea how worried I was? I canceled plans with my friends, rushed to the airport. All for nothing?" "It's not nothing," she insisted. "We got to see you. That's not nothing." I left the hospital without another word, checking into a nearby hotel instead of staying at their house. I was too angry to be around them. The next morning, I woke up to 15 missed calls and dozens of text messages from my parents. They were apologizing, begging me to come over, promising they'd make it up to me. Against my better judgment, I went. When I arrived, they were all smiles and apologies. They'd made my favorite breakfast and were falling over themselves to make me comfortable. As we ate, they started in on their usual spiel about how much they needed me. "We've been thinking," my dad said, "and we have a proposition for you." I braced myself. "What kind of proposition?" "Well," my mom chimed, "we know you're worried about your career, so we thought, why not start your own business here? We could help you get it off the ground." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of business?" "A marketing firm," my dad said enthusiastically. "You could be your own boss, make your own hours, and we'd be your first clients." I almost laughed out loud. "Dad, starting a business takes a lot of capital and experience and connections. It's not something you just do on a whim." "Oh, we've thought of that," my mom said, reaching for an envelope in the counter. "We've decided to give you your inheritance early. It should be enough to get you started." She slid the envelope across the table. I opened it to find a check for a substantial amount of money. For a moment, I was tempted. It was a lot of money, enough to potentially make a go of it. But then I came to my senses. This wasn't about helping me start a business. This was about tying me to them, making me dependent on them again. I slid the check back across the table. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I can't accept this. My life is in Chicago. I'm not moving back, and I'm not starting a business here. I left shortly after, ignoring their protests and pleas. On the flight back to Chicago, I made a decision. I needed to set some firm boundaries, or this would never end. When I got home, I sent them an email. I explained that while I loved them and wanted to support them, their behavior was unacceptable. I laid out clear boundaries. No more surprise visits, no interfering with my job, no guilt tripping. I told them I would be limiting our phone calls to once a week, and that if they violated these boundaries, I would have to limit contact even further. They didn't take it well. For a few weeks, they refused to speak to me at all. As hurt as I was by their actions, that silence was almost worse. Despite everything, they were still my parents. I loved them, even if I didn't always like them very much. Finally, after about a month of radio silence, my dad called. His voice sounded tired and a little sheepish. "Micah," he said, your mother and I owe you an apology." I was so surprised I nearly dropped the phone. In 28 years, I don't think I'd ever heard my dad apologize for anything. "We were wrong," he continued. "We shouldn't have tried to force you to come back. And we definitely shouldn't have interfered with your job or tried to bribe you with that inheritance money. We were scared. Getting older is scary, son. And the thought of facing it without you here, well, it terrified us." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I understand that, Dad, but you have to understand that I have my own life now. I want to help you and Mom, but I can't give up everything I've worked for." "I know," he said softly. "Your mother and I have been talking a lot. We realize now that we've been too dependent on you. It's not fair to put all that on your shoulders." We talked for over an hour. By the end of the call, we had to come to an understanding. They would accept the home health aid help I had arranged. I would commit to visiting more often, at least once a month, and calling more regularly. And most importantly, they would respect my decisions and my independence. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, we slowly began to rebuild our relationship. There were still moments of tension, still times when they'd make comments about how nice it would be if I lived closer. But overall, things improved. They even started seeing a therapist, both individually and as a couple. It was helping them work through their fears about aging and their tendency to rely too heavily on me. About a month ago, I flew home for a long weekend. It was the first time I've been back since the big blow-up. I was nervous as I walked up to the front door, not sure what to expect. To my surprise, my parents greeted me with warm hugs and genuine smiles. There was no guilt tripping, no passive-aggressive comments about me abandoning them, just a nice, normal visit. On my last night there, as we sat around the dining room table finishing up dessert, my mom reached out and took my hand. "Micah," she said, her eyes a little misty, "I want you to know how proud your father and I are of you. You've built a wonderful life for yourself in Chicago. We're sorry we tried to interfere with that." I felt my own eyes start to well up. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." My dad cleared his throat. We've been thinking that spare room upstairs, we're thinking of turning it into an apartment, with a little kitchenette and its own bathroom. That way, when you come to visit, you'll have your own space. I was touched by the gesture. It was a far cry from their previous insistence that I move back into my childhood bedroom. "That sounds great, Dad. I'd love that." We spent the rest of the evening looking at design ideas online and making plans for the renovation. As I flew back to Chicago the next day, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. Don't get me wrong, things aren't perfect. My parents still have their moments of neediness, and I still sometimes feel guilty for living so far away. But we're in a much better place now. They're learning to be more independent, and I'm learning to be more present, even from a distance. I know there will be more challenges ahead as my parents continue to age, but I'm hopeful that we can face them together as a family without sacrificing my independence or their dignity. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's the importance of setting boundaries, even and especially with the people you love most. It's not always easy, but it's necessary for healthy relationships. To anyone out there facing similar pressure from family, my advice is this: stand your ground, do it with compassion. Remember that fear often masquerades as control. And most importantly, don't let anyone, not even your parents, make you feel guilty for living your own life. It's possible to be a loving, supportive child without sacrificing your own needs and dreams. It might take some time and a lot of difficult conversation, but it's worth it in the end, because true family support goes both ways. And sometimes the most loving things you can do for your parents is to show them that you can thrive on your own. Here are my thoughts about the story. The whole fake hospital emergency? Crazy and insensitive to boot. I know, and I'm sure that you guys know or are someone with a family health scares. That part made my blood boil. I mean, who does that? It's like the boy who cried wolf, except the boy is a grown-ass woman trying to guilt-trip her son. Not cool, Mama, Micah. Not cool at all. And don't even get me started on them trying to bribe Micah with his inheritance. It was a decent train of thought objectively, but when you put it into this situation, it isn't parental support, it's boundary pushing. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse, except Micah did refuse, and good on him for that. It takes some serious backbone to turn down a fat check, especially when it's dangled in front of you by your own folks. But here's the thing that really struck me about this story. It's not just about overbearing parents, it's about the struggle we all face growing up and becoming our own people. Micah's journey is something I think a lot of us can relate to, even if our parents aren't quite as, let's say, enthusiastic as his. There's this guilt that comes with spreading your wings, like you're somehow betraying the people who raised you by wanting to live your own life. But that's the thing. Growing up and building your own life isn't a betrayal. It's exactly what we're supposed to do. Our parents' job is to raise us to be independent, functioning adults. If they've done their job right, we should be able to go out into the world and thrive. And from what I read in this story, Micah is doing just that. I gotta give major props to Micah for standing his ground. It could have been easy, especially with all the guilt-tripping and manipulation his parents were throwing at him. But he stuck to his guns, set those boundaries, and even managed to help his parents see things from his perspective. And you know what? I'm glad this story had a somewhat happy ending. When Micah's dad finally called to apologize, I felt this weight lift off my chest that I didn't even realize was there. It just goes to show that it's never too late to work on a relationship, even when it seems like it's gone completely off the rails.
And now, guys, we will move on to the second story of the video. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it so far. The story starts like this.
My wife's sister tried to make me look like an abuser. My name is Daniel, and this is the tale of how my sister-in-law, Joanna, nearly destroyed my marriage and my life by trying to paint me as an abuser. It's been a long and painful journey, but I'm sharing it to show that the truth can prevail even in the darkest of times. I met my wife, Victoria, at a friend's barbecue maybe 7 or so years ago. She was stunning. Long auburn hair, bright green eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. We hit it off immediately, talking for hours about everything from our favorite books to our dreams for the future. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see her again. Our relationship progressed quickly. Within a few months, we were practically inseparable. Victoria told me about her family early on, including her older sister, Joanna. They were close, having grown up with just each other and their mom after their dad passed away when they were young. I was excited to meet Joanna, hoping to make a good impression on someone so important to Victoria. That first meeting should have been a red flag. We met for dinner at a local restaurant, and from the moment Joanna laid eyes on me, I could feel her disapproval. Her smile was tight, her handshake a bit too firm. Throughout the meal, she peppered me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than friendly conversation. So, Daniel, what exactly are your intentions with my sister? She asked, her eyes narrowed. I chuckled nervously. Well, I care about Victoria a lot. We're taking things one at a time, but I see a real future with her. Joanna didn't seem satisfied with my answer. But Victoria squeezed my hand under the table, giving me a reassuring smile. As time went on, Joanna's behavior became increasingly hostile. She'd make snide comments about my job as a graphic designer, implying it wasn't a real career. She'd question Victoria about our relationship when I wasn't around, suggesting that maybe she was moving too fast with me. One incident stands out in my memory. About 6 months into our relationship, Victoria and I were invited to a family dinner at her mother's house. Joanna was there, of course, and she spent the entire evening making backhanded compliments and subtle digs at me. Oh, Daniel, she said at one point, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I hear graphic design is such a competitive field. It must be so stressful, never knowing when your next paycheck will come. How do you manage? Before I could respond, she turned to Victoria. You know, sis, that one guy from your high school is doing really well in his law firm. He was asking about you the other day. I saw Victoria's discomfort, but she quickly changed the subject. Later, when we were alone, she apologized for her sister's behavior. She's just protective, Victoria said. She'll come around eventually. But Joanna didn't come around. If anything, her interference only intensified as our relationship grew stronger. Despite Joanna's attitude, Victoria and I grew closer. After 2 years together, I proposed during a weekend getaway to the beach. Victoria said yes, and we were both over the moon. When we called to share the news with her family, Joanna's reaction was lukewarm at best. Are you sure about this, Victoria? She asked, her voice laced with concern. You've only known this man for 2 years. That's not very long. Victoria brushed off her sister's concerns, assuring her that she knew what she was doing. But I could see the seed of doubt Joanna has planted. As we began planning our wedding, Joanna's interference intensified. She'd constantly question Victoria's choices, from the venue to the dress. She even tried to convince Victoria to postpone the wedding, saying she was too young to tie herself down. One day, about 8 months before the wedding, Victoria came home looking upset. When I asked what was wrong, she hesitated before speaking. Joanna took me to lunch today, she said. She showed me some articles about financial abuse in relationships. She said she's worried that you might be controlling our finances. I was stunned. What, Victoria? You know that's not true. We make all our financial decisions together. You have full access to our joint account. Victoria nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I know. It's just Joanna seems so concerned. She pointed out how you've always the one who handles paying the bills. Because you asked me to, I exclaimed. You said you hate dealing with paperwork, so I offered to take care of it. But you know I always show you all the bills and transactions. This became a pattern. Joanna would plant a seed of doubt, and I'd have to work to reassure Victoria. It was exhausting and frustrating, but I loved Victoria and was determined to make our relationship work. Another incident occurred about 6 months before the wedding. Victoria and I had planned a weekend getaway, just the two of us. The night before we were set to leave, Joanna called Victoria in a panic, claiming she had broken up with her boyfriend and needed her sister's support. Victoria was torn. She wanted to be there for her sister, but also didn't want to cancel our plans. I encouraged her to go to Joanna, saying we could reschedule our trip. Victoria was grateful for my understanding and went to comfort her sister. 2 days later, when Victoria returned, she seemed distant. When I asked what was wrong, she hesitated before speaking. Joanna, she said some things while I was there, Victoria admitted. She said it was suspicious that you were so quick to let me cancel our plans. She suggested that maybe you were relieved to have some time alone, that maybe you're not as committed to this relationship as you claim to be. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Victoria, I encouraged you to go because I knew how important it was to you. I was disappointed about our trip, but I wanted to support you supporting your sister. How could she twist that into something negative? Victoria shrugged, looking uncomfortable. She said that's what abusers do. They act understanding to make you feel guilty later. It was clear that Joanna's words were having an impact on Victoria, and it was starting to affect our relationship. We argued more frequently, often over small things that had never been issues before. One evening, about 4 months before the wedding, Victoria and I had a small argument about wedding expenses. Nothing major, just a disagreement about the budget for flowers. Later that evening, Victoria went to take a shower, leaving her phone on the coffee table. It lit up with a message from Joanna. Remember what we talked about, sis? If he gets angry or tries to control the wedding planning, that's a red flag. You can always come stay with me if you need to get away. I felt sick to my stomach. Joanna's wasn't just voicing concerns anymore. She was actively trying to sabotage our relationship. When Victoria came out of the shower, I confronted her about the message. Victoria, I saw Joanna's text. What exactly has she been telling you about me? Victoria looked uncomfortable. It's nothing really. She's just concerned. She thinks you might have some abusive tendencies. I was floored. Abusive tendencies? Victoria, you can't possibly believe that. I don't know what to believe anymore, Victoria said, her voice trembling. Joanna keeps pointing out things, how you always want to know where I am, how you get upset if I spend too much time with my friends. I ask where you are because I care about you, I exclaimed. And I've never gotten upset about you spending time with your friends. I encourage it. But I could see the damage was done. The trust between us had been eroded by Joanna's constant whispering in Victoria's ear. The next few weeks were tense. Victoria seemed to be walking on eggshells around me, and I felt like I had to watch every word and action for fear of it being misconstrued. Our wedding plans were put on hold as we tried to navigate this new, uncomfortable dynamic in our relationship. Joanna's interference didn't stop there. She began to involve other people in her campaign against me. She reached out to Victoria's friends, sharing her concerns about my behavior. She even went as far as to contact Victoria's workplace, suggesting that I might be interfering with Victoria's career progress. One Saturday morning, Victoria received a call from her boss asking if everything was okay at home. Confused, Victoria asked what she meant. Well, her boss said hesitantly, your sister called. She was worried that you might be in a difficult situation at home, possibly preventing you from advancing in your career. I just wanted to check in. Victoria was mortified. She assured her boss that everything was fine and ended the call, turning to me with a mix of anger and confusion on her face. Did you know about this? She demanded. Did you ask Joanna to call my work? I was shocked. Of course not, Victoria. I would never do something like that. This is all Joanna. Can't you see what she's doing? But the doubt was there, planted firmly by Joanna's constant manipulations. Things took a turn for the worse when Victoria's best friend since middle school got involved. One afternoon, she showed up at our apartment unannounced. She asked to speak to Victoria alone, and they went into our bedroom while I sat in the living room, confused and worried. After about an hour, they emerged. Her best friend gave me a cold look before leaving, and Victoria looked like she had been crying. What's going on? I asked, my heart racing. Victoria took a deep breath. She says she's noticed things too. She thinks Joanna might be right about you. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Right about what, Victoria? This is insane. I've never done anything to hurt you. I love you. I know you say that, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. But they've made me see things differently. The way you always want to know where I am, how you get jealous sometimes. That's normal relationship stuff, I protested. Everyone gets a little jealous sometimes. It doesn't make me abusive, but I could see I was losing her. The doubts Joanna had planted had taken root, and now with her best friend backing her up, Victoria was slipping away from me. The next day, I came home from work to find Victoria packing a suitcase. What are you doing? I asked, my voice shaking. I'm going to stay with Joanna for a while, Victoria said, not meeting my eyes. I need some time to think. I felt like my world was crumbling around me. Victoria, please, don't do this. We can work this out. But she shook her head. I need some space, Daniel. I need to figure out what's real and what's not. As she walked out the door, I felt a determination rise within me. I wasn't going to let Joanna destroy our relationship with her lies. I was going to fight for Victoria and for the truth. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. Victoria wasn't returning my calls or messages. I heard through mutual friends that she was still at Joanna's, and that Joanna was encouraging her to call off the wedding. I knew I needed to do something drastic to save our relationship. I decided to gather evidence to prove that Joanna's accusations were false. First, I went through our text message history, screenshotting conversations where I encouraged Victoria to spend time with her friends and family. I compiled a list of all the times I had suggested she go out with her girlfriends or visit her mom. Next, I reached out to our mutual friends. I explained the situation and asked if they had ever seen any behavior from me that could be considered controlling or abusive. To my relief, they were all shocked by the accusation and assured me they had never seen anything of the sort. I even went as far as to consult a therapist, explaining the situation and asking for their professional opinion on whether my behavior, as I described it, showed any red flags for abuse. The therapist assured me that based on what I had shared, there were no indications of abusive behavior. Armed with this information, I decided to confront Joanna directly. I knew it was a risk, but I felt I had no choice. I called her and asked to meet, saying it was about Victoria. To my surprise, she agreed. We met at a coffee shop, the tension palpable as we sat across from each other. Joanna, I began, trying to keep my voice steady, I know what you've been telling Victoria about me. I'm here to tell you that it's not true. I've never been abusive or controlling towards Victoria. Joanna's eyes narrowed. I'm just looking out for my sister. I've seen the signs, Daniel. The way you always want to know where she is, how you've isolated her from her friends. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. I have evidence that proves otherwise, I said, pulling out my phone. I have texts showing I've encouraged Victoria to spend time with her friends. I have statements from our mutual friends saying they've never seen any abusive behavior from me. I even spoke to a therapist who said my behavior doesn't show any red flags for abuse. Joanna looked taken aback. She clearly hadn't expected me to come prepared with evidence. Why are you doing this, Joanna? I asked. Why are you trying to destroy my relationship with Victoria? For a moment, Joanna's mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it jealousy? Resentment? You're not good enough for her, Joanna spat. Victoria deserves better than some struggling artist who can barely pay his bills. And there it was, the real reason behind Joanna's actions. It wasn't about protecting Victoria at all. It was about her own prejudices and judgments. I may not be rich, I said, my voice firm, but I love Victoria more than anything in this world, and I'm not going to let your lies destroy what we have. I stood up, gathering my things. I'm going to show all of this to Victoria. She deserves to know the truth. As I walked away, I heard Joanna call out, She'll never believe you over me. I'm her sister. But I was determined to prove her wrong. I went straight to Joanna's house, my heart pounding as I knocked on the door. Victoria answered, her eyes widening in surprise. Daniel, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you, I said. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Victoria hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let me in. Over the next hour, I showed Victoria everything. The texts, the statements from our friends, even my notes from the therapist. I told her about my conversation with Joanna and the real reason behind her actions. As Victoria looked through the evidence, I could see the realization dawning on her face. Tears welled up in her eyes. I can't believe I let her manipulate me like this, Victoria whispered. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I took her hands in mine. I understand why you had doubts. Joanna is your sister and you trust her. But Victoria, I love you more than anything. I would never do anything to hurt you. Victoria nodded, wiping away her tears. I love you too. Can you forgive me for doubting you?" "Of course," I said, pulling her into a hug. "We've been through a lot, but we can get through this too." Just then the front door opened and Joanna walked in. She froze when she saw us together. "Victoria, what's going on?" she demanded. Victoria stood up, her face set in determination. "Joanna, I know what you've been doing. I've seen the evidence. How could you try to destroy my relationship like this?" Joanna sputtered, trying to defend herself, but Victoria cut her off. "I don't want to hear it," she said. "I think you should leave. I need some time to think about whether I want you in my life at all after this." Joanna looked shocked, then angry. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Victoria turned to me, a mix of emotions on her face. "I have a lot of thinking to do," she said, "about us, about my relationship with Joanna, everything." I nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." The next few weeks were a period of healing and rebuilding. Victoria and I started seeing a couples therapist to work through the trust issues that had developed. We had long, honest conversations about our relationship and our future. Victoria also had to deal with the fallout from Joanna's actions. She decided to take a break from her relationship with her sister, needing time to process the betrayal and decide if reconciliation was possible. Our wedding plans, which had been put on hold during the ordeal, slowly started up again. This time we were more united than ever, making decisions together and supporting each other through the process. 3 months later, we stood at the altar, ready to say our vows. As I looked into Victoria's eyes, I saw nothing but love and trust. We had weathered a storm that would have torn many couples apart and come out stronger for it. During her speech at the reception, Victoria's mom addressed the elephant in the room. "I know the road to this day hasn't been easy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But seeing you two together, it's clear that your love is strong enough to overcome any obstacle. I'm proud to welcome you to our family, Daniel." Joanna wasn't at the wedding. Victoria had decided she wasn't ready to have her there. It was a decision I fully supported. As Victoria and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, she leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for fighting for us even when I couldn't." I pulled her closer. "I'll always fight for us, Victoria. Always." It's been 2 years since our wedding and life has settled into a beautiful rhythm. Victoria and I are stronger than ever, our trust in each other unshakable. We've even started talking about having kids. As for Joanna, Victoria has slowly started rebuilding their relationship. It's not the same as it was before, and it may never be, but they're working on it. Joanna has apologized for her actions and is seeing a therapist to work through her own issues. Looking back on everything we went through, I'm amazed at how close we came to losing it all. But I'm also grateful in a way. This experience taught us the true value of trust, communication, and fighting for what you love. It showed us that our bond was strong enough to withstand even the most determined efforts to break it. To anyone out there facing similar challenges in their relationship, I say this: don't give up. Fight for the truth, fight for your love, and most importantly, trust your heart. It won't lead you astray. Here are my thoughts about the story. Joanna is terrifying and infuriating, but also terrifying. The way she slowly poisoned Victoria's mind against Daniel was so infuriating. I found myself yelling at my screen more than once, like, "Girl, don't you have your own life to mess up?" But here's the thing that really got me: the way Daniel handled it all. I gotta say, I'm impressed. When things started going south, he didn't just roll over and take it. Nah, my man gathered evidence like he was starring in his own episode of CSI, Relationship Edition. Screenshots, friend testimonials, even a freaking therapist consultation. Daniel wasn't playing around, and I respect the hell out of that. Now let's talk about Victoria for a hot minute. I'll be honest, there were moments when I wanted to reach through the screen and shake some sense into her. Like, "Girl, how can you not see what your sister is doing?" But then I had to step back and put myself in her shoes. Family ties run deep, you know? And when someone you trust is constantly whispering doubts in your ear, it's gotta mess with your head. So while I was frustrated with Victoria, I couldn't help but feel for her too. The part that really got me, though, that confrontation at the coffee shop. When Joanna finally showed her true colors and admitted it was all about Daniel not being good enough, oh man, I nearly spit out my drink. It just goes to show sometimes people's motivations aren't what they seem on the surface. Joanna wasn't protecting her sister, she was projecting her own insecurities and prejudices. And ain't that just a slice of real life right there? But you know what? As messed up as this whole situation was, I gotta say it was oddly satisfying to see it all come to a head. When Daniel laid out all the evidence for Victoria, I was doing a little victory dance in my chair. And when Victoria finally stood up to Joanna, chef's kiss, my friends, pure satisfaction. Now, I know some of y'all might be thinking, how could they ever come back from something like this? And I get it, I really do. Trust is a fragile thing, and Joanna did one hell of a job shattering it. But that's what makes this story so powerful, in my opinion. It shows that with enough love, determination, and good old-fashioned communication, you can overcome even the toughest obstacles. I gotta admit, I got a little misty-eyed reading about their wedding. After everything they went through, seeing them come out the other side stronger, that's the kind of happy ending we all need more of in this world. And can we give a shout out to Victoria's mom? That speech at the reception, classy move, Mom, classy move.
Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.